CRO Wisdom podcast with Shani Shoham. Today, he's also a serial entrepreneur, an advisor, ex-president, ex-CEO, everything in between, chief of staff as well. Huge experience in tech. He's actually live from Los Gatos. The background you see are some Californian mountains, and behind is the Atlantic Ocean. Looks like a pretty nice spot to be. Shani, I'm glad to have you on. Before we do, this pod has been brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start or scale or even be invited to a podcast to get great guests like Shani to discuss, get insights with them, grow your audience, your subscribers, get leads, and even get clients, podpire.com to start, scale, or be invited to podcasts. Shani, I am glad to have you on. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your companies?
Sure. So I'm an engineer by background, made a transition to the business side many years ago. Been leading sales, marketing, solution engineering, customer success organizations for technology companies in recent years. Originally from Israel, as you can figure out by the accent, been here in the Bay Area for the last 14 and a half years. Graduated Stanford Business School, and and that's it. And so I'm pretty hands-on, done 5 startups, 2 of them got acquired. One hopefully is going to IPO next year. And happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Charles.
My pleasure. Let's start with your exits. So why did you exited? Was like the money too good to say no to? Were you tired of these businesses? Like, what has been your life plan vs your exits? Have they served you in life, or was it like, yeah, I'm tired, I'm getting out of there?
So the first, so there's 2 companies, one that I founded and one that I joined early on. So the one that I joined early on, there were other stakeholders, VCs, and the original founders, and so it wasn't only my decision. But I think generally, like it's a combination of like how many years you've been working on that, and then what are the exit options. The one that I did was actually in a domain that I know very well, and I intentionally created the company knowing that it's not something that I'm going to IPO. It's not something that's going to grow to $500 million in revenues. I want to build the technology, and I literally identified the companies that would be possible acquirers when I started the company. My plan was to, get the first 15, 20 customers and then sell that. Partially luck, but, that plan actually ended up, exactly as I was planning. The company got acquired literally 2 years after we founded it. And we're pretty much talking to the same acquirers that I had in mind. One of my top 3 actually acquired the company. So,
right. And how big and life-changing were these events? I mean, if you have the cash to buy a house in Los Gatos, that must be like significant amount of money. How did that change you in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I think it kind of transitioned me from, I don't have to worry about retirement anymore, and I'm good, and so I think both acquisitions were pretty, life-changing. I mean, again, we ended up pretty well after both acquisitions.
And what do you attribute that to? Was it being at the right place at the right time? Was it just pure pain and grit and finally getting rewarded at the end? How did you get to these exits?
I think it's a combination of all of the things that you mentioned. Honestly, with startups, a lot of things can go wrong, from, people, market, competition, funding landscape changing. So there are a lot of things that are not in your control. I think on the you know, at least on the second exit, I mean, by then I've already done a few startups, so you know, I think a lot of mistakes that I might have done early on, I didn't do, and so we actually, you know, optimized it well. We got the right investors, which is also very important. Again, it's a domain that I knew very well, and so I knew the problem statement pretty well. I have to say, kind of the initial product that I had in mind, even though you know, I came from the industry and I spoke to, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of companies before I started it. I had in mind a specific solution, and very quickly, you know, we created a very basic MVP. We put it in front of 2-3 customers. We figured out that, you know, it's not what they're looking for. Again, things that we didn't know, we couldn't anticipate ahead of time, and so we quickly pivoted, and yeah, and then from there it was really about, it was a combination of kind of the right team, the you know, being very customer centric, and I think that's one of the things that I don't see enough in startups. I think, you know, two important things based on my experience with startups are one, being very customer centric, customer obsessed even to some extent, and two, is getting the right team on board. And so again, I think I was fortunate to figure out those things.
Right. You occupied so many positions. It's quite interesting, you know, chief of staff, COO, CEO, now CRO. Why are you focusing on the CRO one, which is a mix of various disciplines and skills?
Yeah, I guess first of all, I'm a good generalist, and so I can quickly understand domains, and I'm very hands-on, so I quickly get my hands dirty. And so and I think after doing a bunch of these roles, honestly, every role at some, you know, at some capacity involved sales and sales management. So I you know, I kind of like being you know, in front of customers, and I have a general curiosity, and so I like kind of asking questions, understanding their problems, and so it's a good spot to be. But yeah, I think I'm you know, I learn very quickly new domains, and that, you know, I guess that is a good attribute when you're a chief of staff or a COO, because you handle so many various domains. And yeah, and it also equipped me to kind of you know, again, I was a chief of staff probably like 10 years ago to a great CEO. I learned a lot from that, and it really gave me exposure to a lot of the domains in the company, and I had a good mentor. And so I think, you know, that kind of prepared me to, you know, C-level roles that I had down the line.
And what about all your advisor roles nowadays? What does that entail? These companies, they pay you for your expertise, your network. It's like being a consultant. Is that how it rolls? Do you get shares also?
No, I'm not really a good consultant, and so you know, funny enough, I actually started at work as a consultant, but after like 2 months, they said, you know, you're spending too much time here, so you might as well join full time. So as I said, I'm not a good consultant. I typically with those companies, you know, I'm an advisor, so you know, I get shares, and I'm pretty flexible on kind of the way that I engage with the company. I think at the end of the day, I can give advice from experience, but the founders really, you know, are dealing with the day to day. And so, you know, kind of my role is probably to ask them the right questions, and maybe to, you know, kind of share another data point so they can make the right decisions. And many times making sure that they, you know, kind of asking those questions in a way that they wouldn't make the mistakes that I probably made, you know, a while back. So that's it. Again, some founders I probably, you know, speak weekly or even multiple times a week, depending on kind of the periods and you know, what help they need. Some of them it's like, you know, once a month checking in, and that's about it. So
I saw lots of the work that you did and as a CRO, you're very agile with tech. You drastically increase the numbers of meetings, for example, and sales. What do you recommend that any sound CRO do to drastically accelerate the growth of a business, especially in the outbound and SDR department nowadays?
So, general comment would be, the first thing is numbers. And so if you don't have visibility to the numbers and you're not measuring them, it's very hard to improve them. I'm a data-driven person, so the first thing I do at every company is I set the infrastructure to be able to measure things. Second thing is, before I ask my team to do something, I typically do that myself. I think that by trying things, by getting on sales calls yourself and trying different approaches, one, it's you learn a lot from that, and two, and then afterwards, like I talk to a prospect about a problem, and then I can talk to the next one and say, hey, this is what I've been hearing. So that's kind of been my approach. You asked specifically about outbound. I think for outbound, one advice that I'll give is, personalize the outreach and do multi-channel. So again, different people like to consume content in different ways. And so, I usually do a combination of like emails, social outreach. I share videos, as well as like short emails. I try, one approach that I tried at one of the companies, we're targeting leaders in a specific organization. So we're actually looking for names of people inside the organization and mentioning them in the email, and that increased the response rate significantly. I like to use things like Hippo and Vidyard and kind of short videos. Again, some people are more visual than others, so it's an easy way to kind of understand what you do and attach a face to the name. That's it. I like to do things that don't scale, and so many times before I start sending thousands of emails, I'll try a certain format here and there, literally manually. Other thing is constantly do A/B testing. So, 1-2 experiments, make sure that you have enough data, figure out what works best, and then, use that and run another experiment. So constantly try to optimize, but the basic thing is just knowing your numbers.
Right. And I want to ask you, sales and AI, what do you see fermenting out there? What trends, what new approaches, and how is AI going to change the sales market drastically in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think it already is. And so I can tell you, I'm using a lot of like recording tools that kind of summarize my calls and even plug it back into the CRM. I'm generally an early adopter of a lot of these tools, so I'm constantly trying to find ways. I'm always busy. I'm constantly trying to find services that can help me be more productive. And so I was an early adopter of Win.ai and Gong and many other tools. So that's one. Other areas where I see AI getting into sales is kind of improving prospecting, both the finding the contacts as well as personalizing the outreach. I have to say it doesn't necessarily fit every organization. And so again, if your persona is I don't know, the head of marketing or the some well-defined persona and your use cases are relatively generic, then great. But if you're solving a very specific pain point to a specific persona, for example, when I was at Weka, we're targeting, first of all, there were multiple personas depending on the industry, and two, we're targeting like HPC engineers, we're targeting storage engineers. And so I think, kind of really understanding the problem statements and the words that they use is probably too, I don't know that AI is there yet. So again, it's, you have to figure out what kind of AI tool you're using and where. One thing that I'll throw out there, I was actually spending some time with my marketing team earlier this week and last week, kind of analyzing personas, and we found an AI tool that after we spent about 15 hours, kind of defining the personas, the problem statements, the values, we found an AI tool and we literally plugged, basic information, and, it saved us like, it didn't, but it was like equivalent of 15 hours of us doing work. And so, again, I think there's lots of tools out there on prospecting, outreaching, summarizing calls, analyzing your pipeline, and then much more.
Or an AI interviewing you on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I think one caveat about AI, I think it's a strong buzzword, and it's definitely, there's a lot of hype around that. I think in some areas, AI is great. In some areas, it lacks the organizational context. And so, especially if you're using like ChatGPT, again, to create maybe an email, very easy to use ChatGPT. We're in the world of DevOps and developers. And so I think that's where the organizational context really matters. I mean, ChatGPT can create some basic code, but that code probably isn't going to work on your infrastructure on your code base. So I think AI is, we've leapfrogged in the last couple of months, and it feels like the same transitioning that happened 15 years ago with cloud. But at the same time, I think it still, lacks the organizational context. And I think there's tons of opportunities out there to make AI that is private and specific to the organization and actually learns from, the organizational knowledge, the organizational assets, etc.
What are your goals for the rest of this year with Kubiya.ai? What do you want to focus on? What do you want to accomplish?
Mostly build a repeatable process and kind of fine-tune product market fit. I think the problem that we solve, every call I get on, I definitely hear the same problem. One, we need to scale the product to make sure that it supports a lot of those use cases out of the box. I think we're almost there. And then the other thing is, just building a little more repeatability to the point that I feel comfortable, scaling the team that we have, and I kind of know, given a certain resource, how much output we can actually get. And again, I think I'm starting to also see that repeatability as well. And so it's great. And again, at the end of the day, as the CRO, you're only measured on one number, which is your ARR. Well, I guess two numbers, ARR, maybe number of customers. So yeah.
Love it. Where can people find out more about you, Shani?
My email, Shani@Kubiya.ai, my LinkedIn, and podcasts like yours and others. So yeah.
And I am Charles Cormier, host of CRO Wisdom Podcast. If you want to start, scale, or even be invited to podcasts, you can go to